We're reading the whole Bible today, and today is day 104. We're reading 1 Samuel 21 through 24. So David is running from Saul, knowing that Saul for sure wants to kill him now. And he goes to a place called Nob, where there is a village of priests. And he gets to the priest Ahimelech, ends up kind of hiding out there and asks him for bread. And Ahimelech says, the only bread I have is the bread of the presence, the bread, the warm bread that's meant to be kept by the altar. And it's to feed the priests only. And the priest does give it to David, and there doesn't seem to be any negative repercussion from that, except what happens to his family later. But that was something that the Lord had said not to do, not to give that to other people. And yet, here, he feeds it to David and his men, as long as they have kept themselves from being with a woman recently. Two other things happen while David is with this priest. One, a spy from Saul shows up and sees all of this go down. And two, David gets Goliath's sword. He asks for weapons, and he says, the only one I have is the sword that you used to take the head of Goliath. And he's like, that's a good sword. I'll take that one. So David flees to Gath. And the king's servants report that song about like David has killed his tens of thousands. And they're like, isn't that the guy? And the tens of thousands are all Philistines, which is where Gath is. And so David starts like worrying that this is going to be a bad look for him to be killed by the Philistines. And so he starts acting crazy, so insane that the king finally goes, did we have such a shortage of lunatics that you had to send some new ones to me? And so David uses that as an excuse to skip out and get away from King Achish. So David leaves there and ends up in a cave stronghold, and 400 people join him there. His whole family comes, and then a bunch of people who are just discontent with the way things are going in Israel. Saul is absolutely insane. Every time we see him, he's completely unhinged. He's obsessed with killing David now. He's super paranoid. He's just not a good leader, and it's not a good look for a lot of people. And so some people are starting to get pretty fed up, and they go to join David. And it seemingly is out there that David has been anointed king. Saul's definitely aware of it, and so are some of the other people. Some people are starting to recognize, like, maybe we should go side with the new king because Saul is nuts. David gets a word from the Lord, from a prophet Gad, that he shouldn't stay in the stronghold, that's not going to be good for him. And so he flees into the forest of Judah. While he does that, Saul comes looking for him. The picture we get of Saul is he's reclining against a tree playing with his spear. And every time Saul's got his spear, I mean, he has weird thoughts like, they talk about intrusive thoughts. Like, this guy is the king of these. It is like, looks at somebody that out of nowhere, the evil spirit that the Lord has sent to torment him comes on him, and he goes, that guy would make a good hanging on the wall. I'm going to pin him to it with my spear. He is not in a good place, but he's trying to figure out where David is, and his spy says, hey, by the way, I saw David at the priest Ahimelech's house. And so he brings out all the priests, and when they say, like, dude, like, why would it not be okay for us to minister to David? How many times have we sought the Lord on his behalf? How many times have we fed him? Like, we didn't do this to incite rebellion against you. We were just caring for the same guy that we've done this for a bunch of times in the past. And Saul goes, nope, that's it. You're inciting rebellion against me. And he's extremely paranoid delusions. And he demands that they all be killed. And most of his men are like, we are not touching the priests of the Lord. Are you insane? They all refuse to. And then Doeg, the Edomite, the spy that he had sent, he's a foreigner, he's not an Israelite, he goes, I'll do it. And he takes out all of the priests, and then he takes a contingent of people, and they go and basically sack the entire town of Nob and just eradicate the whole thing. I mean, this right here is another just like crazy sin and move against the Lord that Saul, with no need or reason whatsoever, just goes wholeheartedly into. So David goes to save a town in Judah from a Philistine attack and besiegement. And David routs them, gets rid of the Philistines. And while he's in the town, the son of Ahimelech, the only remaining priest from the town of Nob, comes and tells David that Saul has heard that he's there and he's coming to get him. And so they inquire of the Lord. They find out, like, yeah, if you stay here, Saul's going to find you. The people will turn you over to him. This is not going to go well. And so they leave and once again escape Saul by the word of the Lord. And David ends up connecting with Jonathan, and Jonathan renews his covenant of faithfulness to David, saying, like, my dad is not going to get you. I'm going to help make sure that doesn't happen. I believe that God has anointed you king. And when that happens, I will be with you. I'm on your side, and the Lord will not allow you to be taken down by my father. And then they go back their ways. Jonathan is still serving with Saul as part of his contingent. And then David flees and he goes to hide, and people keep trying to turn him over for political gain. They're like, ooh, we'll find favor with Saul if we turn David over to him. And so they try that and it doesn't work out. David keeps just barely skirting by, and Saul keeps hearing about where he's moving and trying to find him. And then right when it seems like he's closing in on him, he gets called away because there's actual Philistine invasions to deal with, and he's got to go manage that because he is actually the king and leader of the army of Israel, and he's supposed to be doing things like that, not chasing David for no reason. So let's talk about chapter 24. David is hiding in a cave. Saul finds out. He's trying to locate him, and he ends up wandering into the cave that David and his men are hiding in to relieve himself. And here we get a big contrast of the way Saul has handled things, all the times he's tried to kill David for absolutely no reason, no provocation. David has been anointed king, but David didn't initiate any of that. And even so, he has never tried to leverage that against Saul in any way. Instead, David sees Saul, his men are like, dude, we got him. Let's take him out right now. And probably everyone would have been on David's side if he had done that. Seemingly, quite a few people know that he's been anointed king. So there's a good chance that the majority of people go with him, and those who don't really have the means to put up much of a resistance. Even Jonathan, Saul's son, has already committed to David and said, when you're king, I'm with you. It probably would have gone well for him. However, he does something else. He crawls forward, he cuts off the corner of Saul's robe, and he backs up. And his men are like, what are you doing? He's like, shh, how dare you, threaten the king of Israel? The Lord put him in this place. We shouldn't touch him. Saul gets done and leaves the cave. And then David walks out and he goes, hey, Saul, I want you to see this. Look what I have. And he falls on his face. I mean, he is like humble about it. He lays down. He's like, I'm so sorry. He's repentant that he even thought about approaching the king. He's repentant that he cut off his garment. Like, I shouldn't have even done this. He said, but I did this. I want you to see how close you came, how much you were in my power. It was within my power to absolutely take you out without even any effort. And I didn't do it. And Saul then repents and goes, you're a better man than me. I won't go after you anymore. I'm going to leave you alone. You are a good man. You deserve everything that's coming to you. Who would do this? Who would allow their enemy to fall into their hands and let him go unharmed? You are a righteous and kind man. And so he leaves. And that's kind of the wrap up of this moment in the history as we're reading it. But what stands out to me from this is this idea of Saul is all about taking those advantages and those opportunities and doing whatever he sees fit to support his best interest. There's never his actual good interest involved in any of this. He's insane, and he's always making the wrong choice about absolutely everything. But as he's doing these things, it's always self-serving. David, on the other hand, keeps choosing the righteous thing. He's humbly serving Saul until he's finally literally driven out under threat of death. And then as Saul establishes an entire campaign against him, I mean, he's even kind of neglecting his duties as king to chase down David and try and take him out. And still, David is not taking the opportunity. He's not living up to the accusations of Saul. He's not allowing that to feed into. He's not thinking like, oh, well, it's my turn to get him now. Whatever sin I might commit against him is justified because of the way he's treated me. He doesn't lean into any of that. Instead, what he does is, even given the opportunity, he still chooses mercy. He chooses grace and forgiveness. And he says, that's the Lord's anointed. I'm going to let God deal with him. And I'm going to leave it in God's hands. I'm going to choose the righteous path, even though to take out Saul in that moment would have eased his suffering, would have made a whole lot of things better, and probably everyone would have been with him, and then he could have started being king of Israel. But instead, he chooses to let Saul go, to let the Lord deal with it, and to continue persevering in suffering and having to deal with this king who is violently opposed to his very existence. But he's going to put up with that until the Lord takes care of Saul, because he is trusting in the Lord and choosing righteousness even when it's the hard thing to do. Man, let's do that. I want to do that. That's what I see in here, and what it looks like to be truly committed to the Lord, even when it doesn't, overtly benefit you in any tangible way. And I want to be that kind of follower of Yahweh. I'd love to hear what speaks to you in these things, what questions and everything else you have. So Drop your comments and questions in the chat, and we'll talk about it. In the meantime, be rad for Jesus.